Tonight's edition of Newsnight on BBC Two with Peter Snow in Blackpool and Jeremy Paxman in London.
This is a modern party living in an age of change. It requires a modern constitution that says what we are in terms the public cannot misunderstand and the Tories cannot misrepresent.
Good evening from Blackpool, where Tony Blair is challenging his party to join him in making its boldest move yet to break with its past. He wants to drop Clause 4 of the party's constitution, with its full-blooded commitment to nationalisation. If he wins, he'll be able to trumpet that it's proof that this really is the new Labour Party this week's slogans proclaim. But at conference fringe meetings this evening, there are cries of betrayal from the left. And even one charge that the leadership has declared war.
I feel it's tragic that at a time when we ought to be launching a programme of unity against the Conservatives at the next general election, we're having an internecine warfare as a result of the leader declaring war on his own constitution.
So how does that go down with John Prescott, the party's deputy leader? Long a party traditionalist, but tonight a champion of change. And what will all this mean to floating voters outside the party? We brought a group of them to hear Mr. Blair's speech. Are they now more or less likely to vote Labour?
They certainly know how to reassure the travelling public in Scandinavia. The Swedes and Finns are insisting that roll-on, roll-off ferries have their bow doors welded shut. The British government is merely ordering inspections of ships here. Why? The Transport Minister says British ferries may look the same, but are different. And are British and Irish governments trying to get, as British government and Irish governments try to get European money to redevelop land around the quaintly named Peace Line, David Lomax has spent the day with the people who live there.
These walls gave people confidence. I don't know why, but they did. They really did. They give some people confidence. And you need to get confidence in the people themselves before you take them away.
It isn't only Arthur Scargill. Others on the party's left have expressed their distaste here in Blackpool tonight for Tony Blair's determination to rewrite Labour's constitution. But what looks likely to be a majority right across the party appears sure to back the plan Mr. Blair announced in a surprise flourish just before the end of his speech today. The speech, though, was about a great deal more than that. It was Mr. Blair's opening bid before the biggest audience he's ever faced as leader, to put over the ideas that he wants the party to accept as the basis for its policies. He began with a claim that would have had little resonance in the past, but today he managed to make it sound as if everyone else should believe it just as he did.
Across the nation, across class, across political boundaries, the Labour Party is once again able to represent all the British people. We are the mainstream voice in politics today. Back on the side.
But first, they had to get rid of the government.
Speak out for them. I say it is time to take these Tories apart for what they have done to our country. Because they are the most feckless, irresponsible group of incompetents ever to be let loose in government on Britain.
Where the Tories had gone wrong, he said, was in their values, and that brought him to the ideological core of his speech, what he stood for.
A belief in society, working together, solidarity, cooperation, partnership. These are our words. This is my socialism. Socialism. And we should stop apologising for using the word. It is not the socialism of Marx or state control. It is rooted in a straightforward view of society, in the understanding that the individual does best in a strong and decent community of people with principles and standards and common aims and values.
So how should this translate into policy? We didn't get much detail, but we did get some Blair-style passion in at least one field.
Education will be the passion of my government. I know how important the education of my children is to me, and I will not tolerate our children going to run-down schools with bad discipline, low standards, mediocre expectations, poor teachers, and no one could anyone else.
But then he was back to Labour's drive for a new kind of politics. A drive that, he said, would end the popular disillusion with the politics of the Tory years.
We must show that our politics is not theirs. Not just that our vision for Britain is different, but also that our means of achieving it is different. A new politics, a politics of courage and honesty and trust. Now, it means telling it as it is. It means not opposing everything every other party does for the sake of it.
So how would he lead the country? And this is where he signalled that his party might not be able to realise all its ambitions.
Politicians are looked to by the people for leadership. And leadership is about having the courage to say no as well as yes. Now, even this week, I heard people say that a Labour government must repeal all the Tory trade union laws. Now, there's not a single person in this country who believes that we shall actually do it. No one believes strike ballots should be abandoned. So why do we say it? We shouldn't, and I won't. Let us just tell it as it is. I have said, and I mean, I am committed to the goal of full employment. We will develop the plans to achieve it, but I won't ever pretend that I can deliver it overnight.
And having told the country he'd be tough, he then appealed to his party to be with him, as he put it, head and heart.
Some of you, I hear, support me simply because you think I can win. But it's not enough. I want more. We are not going to win despite our beliefs. We will only win because of our beliefs.
He was building up to his bombshell. He and John Prescott, he said, would prepare a clear, up-to-date statement of the party's aims.
It requires a modern constitution that says what we are in terms the public cannot misunderstand and the Tories cannot misrepresent.
It was a moment of triumph for those who'd worked long and hard to persuade the leadership to scrap Clause 4. And Mr. Blair concluded with this cry for what he called national renewal.
The next election will offer us the chance to change our country, not just to promise change, but to achieve it. The historic goal of another Labour government. Our party, New Labour. Our mission, New Britain. New Labour, New Britain.
Well, that was Tony Blair's big speech in this hall this afternoon. In a moment, the reaction from the MPs and activists attending fringe meetings around Blackpool tonight. But first, Peter Kellner takes stock of the tortured history of Clause 4 in the party.
As any advertising agency knows, the word new is one of the most potent in any campaign to sell a relaunched product or service. Likewise with the Labour Party, it's the word of the week, in the slogan on the platform and in the choice of the New World Symphony as the conference fanfare music. Before today, the suspicion was that it was all illusion and no substance, that less had changed than met the eye. And then Labour's new leader announced his decision to rewrite the party's statement of aims and values. It's an audacious step. Less than 3 months after taking over as party leader, Tony Blair is serving notice that he'll take no prisoners in his battle to modernise the Labour Party. He's striking at the very heart of traditional socialism, Clause 4 of Labour's constitution. Every party membership card carries a reminder of the party's ambition to secure the common ownership of the means of production, distribution and exchange. Some party members regard those words as sacred. To question them is heresy. Yet their original purpose was not theological at all. It was severely practical. Labour adopted Clause 4 in February 1918. It was designed to do two things. First, to react against the Russian Revolution, which had taken place 3 months earlier. Clause 4 was intended as a democratic alternative to Lenin's dictatorship of the proletariat. Second, it's reflected to the upheavals of the First World War. It was directed, above all, at the middle-class clerical workers in the much expanded public services and munitions factories. At the time, Clause 4 attracted little controversy. The Times' report the next day failed to mention it at all. Yet down the years, Clause 4 made the gradual transition from tactic to dogma, and woe betide any party leader who questioned it.
There seems no doubt that if we are to accept the majority view of those who fought this election, nationalisation on balance lost us votes.
Hugh Gaitskell sought to re-examine Clause 4 after Labour's defeat in the 1959 general election, but he failed. He couldn't persuade the party to make any change. No other leader has tried until today, although 8 months ago, Neil Kinnock, freed from the burdens of party leadership, made clear his belief that the time had come for change.
I think we should replace the 75-year-old ideological commitment to the common ownership of the means of production, distribution and exchange, which at present appears on the Labour Party membership card.
Kinnock went further. He spelt out what he thought a new Clause 4 should say.
To this end, Labour is committed to using the power of the community, exercised through pluralist democracy, accountable government and just laws, to foster the sustainable production of wealth, secure equality of opportunity, ensure equity and high standards in the provision of care and security, and safeguard citizens, workers, consumers and the environment against exploitation.
What's significant about that version of Clause 4 is that it says nothing at all about public ownership. Its aim is to shift Labour away from ideological socialism, the view that it's about systems of economic organisation, and towards ethical socialism, the view that it's about liberty, community and social justice. When John Smith heard of Kinnock's proposal, he moved swiftly to squash debate. Smith's office told journalists that he regarded any move to rewrite Clause 4 as a distraction. Tony Blair takes a different view. Tonight, he's been relaxing with his constituency activists from Sedgefield, but nobody doubts the scale of the challenge he's set his party to agree a new constitution in which socialism is seen no longer as a project to replace market capitalism, but as a way of coming to terms with it.
Peter Kellner. Well, the whole thing was a well-kept secret here in Blackpool. Party officials even kept back the last 3 pages of the release of Mr. Blair's speech so that no one would have wind of his plan. And tonight there's talk of the leadership hoping to put the constitutional changes to the party's executive before Christmas. I'll be asking John Prescott about all that in a moment. First, Mark Mardell on the scale of the opposition Mr. Blair's speech has provoked within the party.
Indignation and disbelief, the dominant feelings among delegates arriving at the rally of the Hard Left campaign group. If anyone was in any doubt that Mr. Blair was signalling that Labour's last remaining holy cow was being led out to slaughter, those sources close to the leader stressed Clause 4 was outdated. But people here think there's nothing outdated about the commitment on the back of their membership card.
It's common ownership, and it's basically it's nationalisation. And what Blair and Prescott now, apparently they don't seem to realise this. If we ditch this, it's the last final link between the unions and the Labour Party.
To me, it represents the National Health Service common ownership. It represents our education system, most of which is controlled by the state. It represents the welfare state. It represents public ownership in terms of the post office, in terms of taking water back into public ownership, in terms of taking rail back into public ownership. That's what the Clause 4 means to me.
At tonight's rally, the left repeatedly made the point that the bitter argument this will inevitably provoke is a stupid distraction from the business in hand.
At this time, we don't want to be arguing about constitutional things like this. We want to be getting on with the job. It'll split the party. The party is an idea, it's principle. You can't change it. And to get rid of Clause 4, try to get rid of it at this time, is ridiculous.
Many people here, and indeed many Labour MPs of all sorts of different political persuasions, believe Tony Blair has deliberately picked a fight. Neil Kinnock did it, John Smith did it, and some say it's essential for a Labour leader to take on the left and, of course, win to prove their political machismo. But if it was in Mr Blair's intention to have a battle, he's certainly succeeded.
I feel it's tragic that at a time when we ought to be launching a programme of unity against the Conservatives at the next general election, we're having an internecine warfare as a result of the leader declaring war on his own constitution. Had he been a bishop in the church, he would probably be facing excommunication as a result of his heresy.
The media at the Winter Gardens are delighted this story will run and run. While some important union leaders appear stoically loyal, they're quietly dismayed. One senior member of the shadow cabinet privately admits to being unhappy. Another has even gone public.
Well, first of all, I don't believe that is going to happen. I do believe that Clause 4 has a deep symbolic significance for a major part of the movement. I certainly think it would be unwise, given the commitment that Tony Blair does have to public ownership, to rewrite it in a way which simply produces a great deal of internal conflict. I think his speech brought the movement together, and indeed with tremendous applause for much of that speech. And I think it's a great pity if all of that has now been sidelined by the uncertainty of the drafting of this new document.
And there was concern from the soft left at tonight's Tribune rally. Peter Hain read out the clause in contention and had a question for his audience.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? I think that we should take up the invitation which Tony issued this afternoon. Along with John Prescott, they're going to draft a new statement of aims and values, and the pledge has been to put it to us after it goes to the National Executive Committee to ask for democratic consultation. We have nothing to fear from that consultation.
But there's also no shortage of enthusiastic modernisers who are delighted by Mr Blair's boldness.
At the end of the day, people are going to judge the Labour Party at the next election by what we actually say to them and language that they understand, not in the rather quaint language of 100 years ago.
Many ordinary delegates aren't steaming with anger, but they do have an affection for Clause 4.
It will cause dissension within the party. There are many people who firmly believe and passionately believe that the Labour Party should stand for certain principles.
Clause 4 encompasses an essential principle for the Labour Party, but it doesn't have to be expressed as a way, in the way it has in the past, of meaning large-scale nationalisation of industries and so on.
In terms of the party's increasingly friendly relationship with capitalism, Tony Blair's speech today was a historic event. His eventual triumph extremely likely, but the left's doubts about him are stronger now, and there are dangers ahead.
Mark Mardell, well, now the man who will be sitting beside Mr Blair and writing out the proposals for these changes in the Constitution will be the Deputy John Prescott. Mr Prescott, you heard Peter Kellner there saying that Mr Blair is striking at the heart of traditional socialism. You're a traditional socialist, you're seen as a traditional socialist. Are you happy to be...
Well, I've always said, and even the campaigns I've been involved in for the leader and deputy leader, that I believe in the traditional values set in a modern setting. And I've actually talked to you about private finance in railways. It's a different system now to it was 40, 50 years ago. But I've made it very clear, I do believe there's a role for public ownership. So did Tony Blair when he talked about the public ownership of the railways and the post office. Neil Kinnock, in the alternative you gave there, made it clear that he didn't really accept public ownership. He certainly didn't spell it out there. And I can tell you that anything I'm involved in as an alternative will be actually putting forward in the aims and objectives that the public ownership is still a feature of Labour's approach in these matters, and one that distinguishes from other political parties here in Britain.
You won't go as far as Neil Kinnock wanted to go.
Well, Neil Kinnock gave his version of it. I think the role of the state, Dennis Skinner was talking about the state can do better things in education, in housing, in health, all these kind of provisions, and in some cases public utilities. There is a role for the state, a very definite one, and in its universal provision of that, it can play a very important part. Galbraith says that, Professor Galbraith, you can't call him a socialist, but it is a very relevant argument. We will certainly have in ours a public ownership aspect in it.
Nevertheless, the words on the back of that membership card are sacred words to many people in your party now, and you're risking civil war in the party. You heard Arthur Scargill.
Well, I heard Arthur, yes, but I mean, I did hear that the conference this week on Monday actually rejected a resolution that had Clause 4 in it. It also rejected another one that said we should take a firm in every part of the manufacturing industry. Now, the party has always, in the last few years, taken a more pragmatic view about it. Most people who justify it say it doesn't mean the total nationalisation of everything. And what Tony Blair is saying is that he wants a debate about what it actually does mean, to put it into its modern setting. I think Peter Hain at the Tribune Group there said, why don't we then have that debate? It has to come back here to our conference to be debated. I don't think we should be scared of debate, do you?
Debate or war?
No, it won't be war. It'll be a debate. The Labour Party has vigorous debates. Some might look on and think it's war, but it's a vigorous debate.
Can you really afford this divisiveness, this inevitable political clash within the party, even if it's not war, between now and next year, the election coming up?
Well, the Constitution's an ongoing thing. I think last year people were saying war about the one member, one vote, the OMAP ballot that took place. I think that has been a good thing. It was very controversial last year. There's no controversy about it now, and most people rather enjoyed the prospect and the potential of voting in that election.
You know how division damages a party, particularly the election draws close. It's somewhere away yet, but it's not that far away.
Well, it's not, but I mean, the Labour Party will have a debate, and Tony is a leader, isn't he? Tony has now said he wants to lead, he wants to have a discussion, a debate. If the Labour Party ever can't debate its issues, whatever those arguments, and it has to crawl away and say, let's have an argument because the election's around the corner. A debate has started. It could be done quite quickly, but there is a debate, and I look forward to it.
Now, do you want it done by Christmas? Do you want it finished?
Well, I don't think we've had time to look at it, how quickly it will be done. I think we would try to draft it as quickly as possible so we can start the debate in the party. The party wants to see what the alternative is. Most people will now say, well, let us see what the alternative is. Will it encompass some of the essential principles that they identify with Clause 4? Will it be in this alternative proposal? When they see that, then they'll make a decision about how intense the debate will be and whether they can come along.
Would you be sad if this led to some people leaving the party?
Oh, definitely. I would definitely be sad that anybody wants to leave the Labour Party, because it would not be necessary if they still believe that there should be a railways that were publicly owned, or a post office that was publicly owned, that we keep our publicly owned health service. These are the things that Tony talked about in his speech, what he defines as his approach on values to socialism. I don't think there's any need to, but I shall be launching a political education campaign, of course, to enter into that debate and probably get more people to join us. I want to keep the people who are in the Labour Party, and I want more to join us by being clear about what we intend and what is the position of the Labour Party in these areas.
Some of those people we heard from tonight may say that you're pushing them out of the Labour Party.
No, I didn't hear any of them say that.
No, they didn't say that.
In fact, I thought it was very reasonable, the tone that was adopted by people. It was an intelligent approach. Say, fine, Mr. Leader, Tony, we hear what you say. Let us see what your alternative is, and then we'll make a judgment. That's political debate. I welcome it, and I'm sure they do. Labour Party people don't run away from vigorous debate.
Let's move on to the rest of the speech briefly. Were you happy with the way Mr. Blair had to say that it might not be that easy to produce some of those policies that Labour would like to see? Full employment, national minimum wage, may take some time.
Well, every one of us has said, I think he gave his remarks basically to full employment. That is, to get 3 or 4 million people back out of the millions that this government's created by its incompetency cannot be done overnight. And he's right to say that. Nobody believes us if we did. But what we've got to say is that we've got to show the kind of policies that will get people back to work. It's no good just mouthing about unemployment as the Tories do. We are committed. It is being put at the top of the political agenda. That's what Tony did today. That's his value, his conviction. It happens to be the one the Labour Party believes in, and you can be sure it will be at the centre of any manifesto that we produce in the coming election.
Is Michael Meacher, do you think, the only member of the Shadow Cabinet who's clearly publicly expressing his unhappiness about this?
Well, unhappiness, but he didn't say he was against. Michael said he thought this was a diversion from a very good speech and it might have a controversy.
Unwise.
Yes, OK, unwise, and that's Michael's judgment, and clearly he feels that, and I quite understand it.
Any other colleagues who haven't spoken up tonight, do you think, are against?
Well, I don't know, but I mean, they'll have the opportunity to do so, but I don't believe any of my colleagues in the Shadow Cabinets are likely to want to run away from debate. This is a realistic, a good debate. Tony's led it, but he's acted like a leader today. Nobody can say today he doesn't know what he wants to do, can they?
John Prescott, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, how's all this going to play with the electorate outside the Winter Garden here in Blackpool?
Let's try Tony Blair as a car.
Back in July, just before Tony Blair was elected leader, Newsnight talked to a group of people selected by the polling organisation NOP as typical of the sort that Tony Blair would have to convince if he's to win the next election.
Seems a very happy character, carefree.
All were floating voters. None had voted for Labour at the last election, and all remained to be convinced that Tony Blair could make them think of voting Labour. Well, today we brought 4 of them from their homes in Manchester to the conference centre in Blackpool. We arranged for them to be admitted to the hall so that they could hear the whole of the new leader's speech. And all of them ended up with views rather different than they'd had 3 months ago. At that time, Karen Thorley had liked the look of Tony Blair, but thought he was short on substance. She voted Liberal at the last general election. So what does she think now?
I liked Tony Blair today. His vision of Britain based on opportunity, responsibility, justice and trust appealed to me very much.
David Escott, 3 months ago, reckoned Prescott would have been a better leader. Blair was too right-wing for him. He didn't vote at the last election.
I found him more credible and more convincing. I thought he carried the hall with him. It remains to be seen how he deals with the rest of the country, selling his ideas.
Colin Harvey, a Liberal voter, had thought Blair, as he put it, a bit of a schoolboy, not enough experience.
It seemed to get the people in the audience moved very well, you know, to with him. But I still think he's maturing a lot more, needs to mature a lot more than what he has done.
Elizabeth Allison, a Tory voter last time, had preferred Prescott in the summer. She believed that Blair was insincere.
On this performance, I would be more likely to vote for him than I would on his previous performance. I thought his delivery was better, he was more coherent, and there seemed to be more passion.
Now, do you think this man looks like a Prime Minister to you? Could he make a Prime Minister?
Yes, I think he could. I think he could. Because he does come across as believing in what he thinks. He managed, as David said, to carry the hall today. And yes, I think he could.
Colin, what difference would it make to you if Labour does scrap part of its constitution, or its constitution, Clause 4, for example?
But I think, as far as I can make out, the Clause 4 is about the nationalisation of the industry. But I think they should bring that back. Should bring back nationalisation.
If you knew that Mr. Blair's Labour Party had scrapped that commitment to nationalisation as the centrepiece of its constitution, would that help you vote Labour or think of voting Labour?
I don't find it a very important clause to me at the moment. I mean, my views on nationalisation are you end up with lazy workforce.
Now, was there enough substance in Mr. Blair's speech for you, enough detail on policy?
No, I'd have liked to have heard more. He says what changes he is going to bring about and the reforms, but he's not given us any inkling as to how he's going to go about them and what these reforms are going to be in education, health, the crime, the commission. I know he's got a special commission.
You'd like to have heard more of substance, Mr. Blair. What do you think? What do you think, Karen? Would you like to have heard more from him on specific policy, or do you think it's time to wait for those?
I think there's time to wait. I think he was much more specific today on various items of policy. But realistically, I don't think you can expect him to be terribly specific so far away from a general election.
Enough meat on the bones?
No, I think he could do with some more meat. But, I mean, he's still got 2 years to go, or approximately 2 years before they have another conference yet, before they can sort things like that out, haven't they?
I feel he was moving more away from enlarging on his philosophy and heading toward policy. It was a feeling I got he was getting more specific. However, as others have said, I think it's too early to expect specific policy.
Is this a different Labour Party than the one you remember in the past? How much has it changed? How much?
I think it's going more to the centre rather than hardline left.
I think it's gone to the right from the centre.
Now, before we end, let me just ask you finally, you've heard Mr. Blair speaking today, his first party conference speech. Would you now, you haven't in the past done this, but would you now consider seriously voting Labour? Put your hands up. 3 out of 4 of you. Thank you very much indeed. Well, the views of just 4 voters, but a straw in the wind perhaps. Back to you, Jeremy, in London.
Thanks, Pete. Now, the Swedish and Finnish